So let's, thank you for reading, and let's get into a little bit about the publishing experience and some questions people might have. I'll try to ask some questions I think you have, and then we'll hopefully have some time for people in the audience to ask questions. But one thing that I found in talking to Deirdre and Mark is that it's very interesting how you came about being published. And I'd like to have each of you just say how that happened. I know, Deirdre, you already mentioned how you got your agent, and Brooke, I know you have your own story about that, so maybe you could each just say a little bit about either what came first or, you know, what happened, just what happened for you.
All right, I'll begin. I was taking classes at UCLA Extension, and I ended up taking more classes through my instructor's private writing group. She knew someone who was running a literary magazine in LA called Swink that was really hot for a while until it went defunct. And the editor accepted one of my short stories, then she accepted another one. And when she accepted the second one and it was published, she wrote in the intro to the editor's letter, she wrote something about me like, you know when you've read something really special or something like that. And then I think that then when agents read the editor's letter, they were like, oh, you know, this editor likes this writer. And they read my story, and then I got calls from agents who were like, we really like your story, do you have a novel? And because I had been writing these short stories all about the same character, I was able to say, yeah, actually I do. I have something that I think could be a novel. So then I was in a great position of going to New York, and I met with several different agents. And one thing is that once one agent is interested in you, then more become so. So that's one thing to keep in mind, is if you get the interest of one agent, and you then tell them, oh, I have this agent that's interested in me, they'll be like, oh, really? It's like, it's a snowball effect. So I went to New York, I ended up choosing one agent who was great, and she sold my book. We did a revision together, she gave me notes. I did a revision based on her notes, and then she sold it about 6 months later.
Well, my story's a little unusual just in that I'm a playwright primarily, so I had spent all these years shopping my plays around. I had a playwriting agent, I had a film agent, I had a television agent, I had a manager. I was pursuing the entertainment industry. And the editor from Random House came to me. There was this article in the New York Times about me, and she saw the play and she read the article, and she called me up and took me to lunch and said, do you think there's a book in this? And I said, sure. Yeah, great. As I want to do when someone asks me to do something. And I was lucky in that I was about to go to the MacDowell Colony for a residency. So I went to MacDowell. I was there working on a screenplay and a play. And I started meeting other nonfiction writers. And, you know, like I pulled some girl aside and said, could you show me what a book proposal looks like? Because the editor had said, you know, I can't make you any promises, but if you write a proposal and you show me a couple of sample chapters, I can shop it around, you know, to my boss, and we'll see what we can do. And like eventually you'll want a book agent and all that. You know, I called my film agents. I was like, could you guys handle this? They said no. Nobody cared. And so I copied this girl Elna Baker's book proposal. She wrote a memoir about being a Mormon, and I just copied the form, like first paragraph this, second paragraph that. And it took me a really long time. I mean, I wasn't sure exactly what the story was. You know, I knew I wanted to write a book, and I certainly had been wanting to write quite a bit about New York in the early 90s when I moved there in 1987. But I wasn't exactly sure what it would be, so it took me a while to write the proposal. I turned that in to the editor, and then I set about writing a sample chapter. I wrote 50 pages over Christmas 2009, over that month. And then I turned that in, and then I happened to meet a book agent sort of through chance. A friend of a friend in New York introduced me to this woman who had just left the film business to work in literary. And I was like, oh, you know, I think I need a book agent. Like, do you want to be my book agent? And she said yes. And she called up Random House a week later, and we had a sale. So that was how that happened.
My story, not that interesting. I wrote a book, I sent it to an agent, he liked it, and he sold it. Although I guess I leave some details out. I wrote this novel over the course of 3 years, and around the same time that I was writing the novel, I started a blog called The Elegant Variation, which, to my great surprise, began to get quite a lot of attention. So, and a little bit of controversy too. And so when the time came for me to shop my book around, and I had a very short list of 5 or 6 agents in New York, and emailed them, and as Deirdre said, they were all interested. They all came back, and I picked the one agent. We did very minor revisions. I think literally it was about 3 days worth of work, and then he sold the book in about 6 weeks. But the more interesting part, I think, of my story was what happened in the rest of the world. With this, we sold the North American rights to Bloomsbury. For those of you who are fortunate enough to get your novels written and then sold, you'll learn that there are different levels of rights that you can sell. Different language rights, you sell North American rights, you sell French language rights, you sell world rights, you sell film rights. It depends what those rights are. And Bloomsbury only purchased the North American rights, so I kind of had the rest of the rights up for sale. And my agency has a very good international rights department, and so they were in the process. They had begun shopping it out to the various countries overseas, and something truly lucky and once in a lifetime happened to me, which is a man named Jamie Bing, who's the editor of Canongate, probably best known to you guys for discovering a book called The Life of Pi and sending it on to win the Booker Prize. And he's kind of a force in publishing. He's kind of young and he's hip, and there's a lot of electricity around everything he does. And my agents had submitted the book to Canongate for the UK rights. Jamie read the book on the flight from London to New York, went down to my agent's office and basically said how much to take this off the table. He wanted to do what was called a preempt for the whole world rights. He was not just interested in the UK. I had a very nervous few hours waiting for the phone call from my agent, and it was then sold for a very generous deal. And what Jamie then turned around is he sold it subsequently to all those other countries. And because when a guy like Jamie Bing gets excited, everyone else just gets excited, suddenly it was going to auction in Germany, it was going to auction in France, it was going to auction all around the world. And literally, as I said, in the end, it was something like 13 or 14 languages, the UK, Australia, Norway, Korea. It was kind of a head-spinning thing. But as some of the other novelists may tell you, and some of my friends know, it's often the case that if you are lucky to have any kind of financial reward from writing a novel, it's really almost more likely to come from international sales, the American publishing market, unless, again, you have a book that catches fire, that goes to auction, that goes to some kind of competitive sale, tends to be a little less remunerative than the rest of the world. But that's I think the more exciting part of how my story unfolded.
So when you said you had a short list of agents, can you talk about how you came up with them?
Sure. Because of my blog, I've been following the publishing business for a while. So I knew folks who had a high profile, who handled the kind of writers. I really sort of went about saying, okay, here are writers who I love, who represents them. The other thing I also did that I recommend to anyone who's ready to do that, and to my students in the class who guys are not ready to do this yet, you go to publishersmarketplace.com, which is a great website, and you can actually search their database of book sales, and there's actually a filter where you can search on debut sales, and so and you can even search down to the amount. So I wanted to know who had sold debuts for lots of money. That was sort of the combination that I was interested in, and that also contributed a couple of names to my list. When we're done, we come back. If you remind me, I'll tell you my Andrew Wiley story.